What was the survival tip that will save your life that actually saved your life? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. If you are sick, injured, or just gone through a medical event, if you get that feeling of impending doom or something just doesn't feel right, do not ignore it. I had this happen to me after I just had my second baby. I was brushed off by the nurses, but the doom feeling didn't go away, and I could feel myself bleeding too much. I physically felt weaker and cold. I looked at my husband and told him I was going to die. I ended up coding shortly after because I had severe postpartum hemorrhaging that they missed. They brought me back, but I had to undergo several blood transfusions, be put on medicine for the bleeding, and have the bleeding clots passed closely monitored. Answer: as someone in nursing, that infuriates me you were brushed off. That sense of impending doom would have had me grabbing the crash cart and messaging the doc to be bedside immediately. I do not fudge with a sense of impending doom. While too many new nurses have the arrogance of textbook knowledge, yet don't listen to their patients. Edit. Goddamn autocorrect. Story 2. Drowning. I saved my son from drowning in a pool. He had swallowed so much water that he couldn't breathe. I put him on his back, rolled him to his side, and hit him on the back. He ended up throwing up numerous times. His first words to me were, "Thanks for saving me, Dad." I still get choked up 15 years later. Story 3. Used to work in the fire service. Maybe not a glamorous tip, but a lot of people were saved by bystanders knowing basic first aid and CPR. In a rural place, we're arriving to a scene 30 minutes after the stopped breathing. 30 minutes without new oxygen or circulation makes massive difference in survival odds. And for traumatic injuries, making an attempt to manage blood loss is always better than nothing. Answer. Question for you. I've been CPR certified twice, and each time I took the course I did well. It was intuitive, and I passed. But within about a year or so, I completely forgot everything about it. So a few years later, when I went to get recertified, again I did well and passed, although I had to completely relearn everything. Nothing seemed familiar from the first time. It's been a few years now, and I, again, completely forgot everything. If it's not something someone does regularly, obviously they're bound to forget everything. And I don't want to be in a situation where they depend on me for their survival, and I'm racking my brain trying to remember something I learned and forgot years ago. Because I actually did remember one thing, and that was if you screw up, you could break ribs or even cause more damage. Is there anything you could recommend so we don't forget? Or do we just need to retake the class every couple years to get recertified? Story 4. Someone else's life. I'm glad those Heimlich maneuver posters are everywhere. I was having lunch on a Monday in a neighborhood that's mostly residential. So it was just me and one other person at another table. He choked on a piece of carrot, and I successfully did the Heimlich on him. I have zero other emergency preparedness skills, but I'm glad I had that one that day. Answer. This is a really good skill to have if you have children. I'd say essential. I've seen 3 kids choke on food over my life, and each saved by the Heimlich maneuver. My little brother twice, saved by my mother one time, our babysitter another. Most recently, my own son. He was choking on an apple peel and his lips were just starting to darken when I managed to dislodge it. The single most dramatic moment of my life, and I'm proud and extremely grateful that I knew what to do. Story 5. Always let someone know where you're going. Many hikers, travelers, or solo drivers were rescued because someone knew their route and raised the alarm when they didn't return. Answer. This one nearly got me eliminating a really bad spot as a teenager. Was camping with my dad deep in the Rocky Mountains. He was out for something I didn't want to do, so I decided I'm going to climb that mountain. It's short, went up 14 mile, then leveled off. Just another 14 mile up. Same thing. Then it finally settled into a steady general slope. Finally, after 2 to 3 miles, I turned around realizing it was too far to find the top. About a mile later, I see a road. I never crossed a road. The way I thought might have been back led deeper into the mountains. Finally, I turned around and kept walking, hoping that I wasn't helplessly lost. Stumbled across a cabin that was fortunately occupied and got directions. I was a mile and a half off the direction I came from. Dad had no idea where I went, or even that I had left. If I hadn't found that road and cabin, I could have been permanently lost and not found my way out. Total mystery when my dad got back. Where's my kid? Story 6. Saved my mother's life. Go learn the Heimlich maneuver. You don't need to be fully trained, but it is definitely better if you are. But at the very least, make sure you understand every part of how it works, because panic will set in the moment. She started choking on a piece of steak at a restaurant, fully blocked airway. I did the Heimlich and got it out while cracking a rib in the process. That shoot terrifying through and through, especially on family. Edit, that don't need to be fully trained is worded badly. When I say you don't need to be fully trained, I mean if you aren't going to do a CPR class, at least make sure you have looked up a proper YouTube video on the subjects. It's not something you can really do in the moment, and you might save someone's life. Story 7. Woke up around 1 a.m. and went to use the bathroom. Started sweating profusely from what felt like every pore in my body, then started feeling like I had to throw up. Individually, they were concerning. Together, they were not good. Woke my wife up and said I need to go to the ER like right now. Got there, told them what was going on, and sent straight into a room. Wife was let in a few minutes later, and we were told I was in the midst of a heart attack. Asked my cardiologist a few days later what would have happened if I had just tried to sleep it off and see how I felt in the morning. He said you wouldn't have woke up. Don't ignore the signs, folks. Answer. Oh, interesting. I once got the sudden sweats overheated feeling. I called my GP, who immediately scheduled me in, and they ran several tests. Everything came up fine, and I was sent home. Told to call again if anything changed. Nothing happened afterwards. I often wondered afterwards about the strong response of my GP. Only learned now that sudden sweats is a possible symptom of a heart attack. That's both good to know and also should be more generally known because it's definitely the kind of symptom I would normally ignore. At the time, I was on new medication, which made me a bit more health paranoid. Story 8. Buddy of mine was put into a coma when he was in the chicken lane trying to turn left. Had his wheels already turned in anticipation for his window when a car slammed into his rear end, lunging his car forward and turned into oncoming traffic, resulting in a head-on collision with a car going 45 miles. I took his trial as a cautionary tale and always kept my wheels straight when waiting for my turn in the chicken lane. Couple of years ago, I got rear-ended in the exact same manner as he did, but I was able to come to a safe stop in the same lane, just a few yards forward, and didn't have a collision. His near-passing experience saved my life, and I still think about him every time I'm waiting to turn. Story 9. Let someone know where you're going and when you plan to return. Always remain calm. I got lost on a snowy moorland once. I was alone, hadn't told anyone where I was going, had no phone signal, and the afternoon was starting to draw in. I knew which direction to go in, but I was worried it'd go dark before I got to civilization. In a panic, I started running, trying to navigate rough and snowy terrain. Thankfully, something clicked, and I just stopped for a second, gathered my senses, and continued to plod on at a sensible speed. I'm still here, more wise, able to tell the tale. Answer. Staying calm is so important. I was stuck in the Boundary Waters on a rental kayak that was way too old to be in regular use. I started panicking and was just about to get out of the kayak to try to swim to a nearby island when I realized that this was the worst idea I ever had, and it didn't matter that I was a strong swimmer. This was dumb as shoot. I called for help. I was in the early stages of hypothermia when they picked me up. The kayak was about to capsize. I would probably have died if I had gotten out of it and into the water with no one knowing where I was. Story 10. Not really a survival tip, but do not swerve for deer in the road. I was coming home from college late one Friday, like 1 a.m., on a road bordering a state park. As I'm tooling along, a deer jumps out in front of me. I hit the brakes, but still hit the deer, which goes tumbling off into the dark. I limp up to the next point I could pull off and look. No real damage, just a dent in the hood and some blood. Come Sunday, I'm heading back to school along the same route in daylight and get to the spot I hit the deer and realize that the road is running along a ridge line with slopes going down about 75 feet on each side. So if I had swerved for the deer and gone off the road, there's a non-zero chance I'd have been down that bank and invisible from the road if I was incapacitated. Moral of the story, don't swerve for deer animals that weigh less than your car. Answer. On a snowy winter day, a deer suddenly wants to cross the road. I try to steer around it. It changes its mind, turns around, and runs into my new path. I hit the deer and get stuck in the snow as well. Had I stayed the course, I would have been home 5 hours earlier and avoided breaking a headlight. Next time, I'll be braking, within reason, but staying on the road. Story 11. Start doing the survival skills before you're in a survival situation. Have been in several situations where things started turning bad, and it is critically important that you do things like keep dry, stay warm enough, not get too far out, etc., before it becomes life-saving to do so. Story 12. Give up everything without hesitation was the lesson. When I was robbed at gunpoint, as the robber turned, he fired the pistol out of panic. Could have been at me. Answer. I had my purse snatched once. I did not fight back, just let go. I was doing everything right. I was in a generally safe, populated area and was paying attention to what was going on around me. I have had so many people tell me I should have hung on to my purse tighter or must not have been aware of my surroundings. I would not have won a tug-of-war over my purse against two men, and me being aware that there were two normal-looking men walking down the street near me didn't magically stop them from robbing me. The cops caught up with them half a mile down the road. One of them had a knife, the other a gun. Who knows what would have happened if I tried to fight or run? Story 13. Stay calm. One time I stupidly decided to go for a hike later in the day and ended up breaking my phone. No flashlight. It got pitch black in the forest really fast, and I got completely lost off the trail. I felt myself starting to panic, so I sat down for a few minutes, collected myself, and finally ended back on the main trail and back to my car. If I had panicked, I'd probably would have spent all my energy hiking in the wrong direction and broken an ankle in my madness. The main thing in any emergency is to do everything you can to keep yourself calm. Story 14. My Guido grandfather was a jovial man. He was short, a Ukrainian-Canadian immigrant, a WIS RCAF vet, bald since he was 30 with a comb-over, and a retired railroad man who grew vegetables and roses. Nothing really bothered him, but we were getting ice cream when I was 12, and I was an overgrown kid. But some guy in his 30s tried to flirt with me and squeeze my butt. My Guido, who was shorter than me with a grandpa gut, squared up on this tall, muscular man and growled out a threat I don't remember because I jumped and backed up when the guy touched me. But something about that silent generation, cold fury, made this dude beat retreat. He turned back to me, gently took my hand, and we went back to the ice cream window and ordered. I could feel the heat leaving his body. I didn't even feel that upset. The guy had touched me and scared me a bit, but I never felt unsafe because I had always felt protected, because I was with him. He had always been there to catch my falls and pull me back from danger. I told him that, but he said, I won't always be there. You're going to go to high school and university and go off with your friends, and sometimes you'll end up alone. What you have to do is be scarier than them. I learned that in the war. If we ever came across a Jerry and the boys, we were supposed to act crazy, like rabid dogs, and start shooting. The bullets don't scare them, but you put the two together and they panic, and you can get them in the back. When I was 20, before cell phones, I was walking home alone. 3 beers and some magic mushrooms deep. Guido had been dead a year after a massive stroke, but a man following me had just made it on my radar, so I turned right. He followed me. I turned right again. He followed me. And I remembered Guido telling me if I saw Jerry, so I turned around and started howling like a trapped dog, just screaming and a wooing and thrashing in the air. He stopped. I screamed, fudge, you son of a meanie, fuck! I flailed some more. I acted like a feral werewolf in a movie. I knew it was partly the mushrooms and beer uninhibiting me, and Guido's rage in my veins. And the guy turned around and started walking, then jogging as I screamed and spat. When I was sure he was gone, I ran home in my heels. If you see Jerry, answer. You'll never forget a story I heard on an episode of a podcast I listened to about how someone had broken into their house while they were asleep. They went out in the hallway after they heard a noise, and down the hall they could see a man. They instinctively started acting feral, like you described. Freaked the intruder out so much he bolted. That's always stuck with me in my plan if I ever need it, just like in your story. Story 15. Self-Heimlich. I choked on food while driving in a busy street, didn't breathe for over a minute because it was standstill traffic and I was in the middle lane. Ended up cutting people off at the slightest sight of room, put my car in the ditch, and 8th grade home EC came to mind as I Heimlicked myself on the spoiler of my car. Cracked a rip, spit the food out, and cried for 10 mins because my vision started to go black. Answer. I will note this advice from an actual paramedic who taught my CPR first aid class. Self-Heimlich should be the last resort. If you can get help, get help. In your example of driving in standstill traffic in the middle lane, put on your hazard signals. Put the car in park. Exit the car. Hail down someone in one of the other cars to come help you. Or if you're home alone, call 911 immediately, or the emergency number for your country, and open your front door. That way emergency services is on their way and can access you. Then you can give Self-Heimlich a shot. Story 16. My stepdad thought he was having a heart attack and chewed an aspirin. Turns out he was right, and the doctor said it likely was the reason he lived. Story 17. I don't know if this actually saved my life, but somebody hit me on the highway while I was driving with cruise control on 75 mph on a 70 km highway, hit on my left passenger side, and my car spun out across 2 lanes of traffic and spun in full 2 circles, I believe. The entire time it was happening, I stared right at my steering wheel with my dad's voice in my head saying, ease into the turn, do not overcorrect or try to go the other way. So with my passing grip on the steering wheel, I slowly went with the motion of the car and we didn't flip over or anything. It was terrifying. I remember at some point seeing my dog in midair in the back seat. She had a seatbelt leash. Thank God. Totaled my vehicle, yet the man who hit me somehow was able to somehow stay on the road and got away with it. Story 18. If you think something isn't normal in your body, listen to it. Your body will tell you if something isn't right. Literally saved my life from a major brain stroke. Started having the worst headache of my life, except it wasn't like the rest. So I got up somehow and managed to get my dad in time. Send today now. I can continue to live, Judy, because I listened to my body when it told me something. Answer. My third and youngest, almost 10-year-old kid, somehow seemed to seriously hurt his ankle while laying on the couch recovering from a tonsillectomy, adenectomy. We had no idea how it happened, but he complained about it far more than his throat. Even my nurse sister looked at it and couldn't see anything outwardly wrong. Since it was still weird, I made an appointment with our GP. The next day, I couldn't get him up to go to the car. He collapsed the second we had him up, so I called 911. Turns out his classmate had had strep A and exposed him at school the day before his surgery. And the strep decided to do a full body tour 2024 inside my kid and decided his left ankle joint, neighboring, thankfully minor growth plate, was the place to drop anchor. The docs told us I wouldn't have been able to rouse him the next morning. He was so close to dying of sepsis. The ID doc said his CRP, I think is what it was called, basically the level of infection in his blood. Repressed trauma makes things a little fuzzy sometimes, was the highest he'd seen in his 20-year career. And then after 24 hours on the craziest doses of amoxicillin I've ever seen, his CRP was still the second highest ever. He was in the hospital for 10 days, having several surgical procedures to clean up the infection. In addition to damaging the joint and bones on both sides of it, it completely dissolved one of his open growth plates. The ortho's description: fucking barf, I dislike medical shoot. He was in a wheelchair for months, and the first 3 weeks home, I was in charge of dosing him every 8 hours with 1,375 million of amoxicillin. 8 a.m., 4 p.m., 12 a.m., no exceptions, 3 weeks straight. After his left ankle finally healed, he had his last surgery at the beginning of March 2025, which was actually surgery on both ankles. The fairly simple removal of 2 pins that had served as the scaffolding of new bone growth from his left, and the total removal of the matching healthy growth plate from his right. It was the least painful of our options to make sure he didn't walk like the penguin, in his own words. He might not hit the final height he would have been had he not gotten sick, but since the damaged and removed growth plates were only responsible for approx 20 of total adult height, he might lose 1 to 2 inches total. His dad is 6'1" and older bro is 6'2", so he should still hit at least 5'10", according to the ortho. This went from early OC 24, late April 2025, and I'm just now starting to process shoot. Had to put my mom face on and just do what needed to be done until it was over. And now that it's over, whew. TLDR, what they said, if shoot is weird, get it checked out. Story 19. Not quite life-saving, but it sure felt like it at the time. I didn't realize I had heat exhaustion and got on a roller coaster. When my vision started going gray at the edges, I remembered the Mythbusters Blue Angels episode where they talk about the full-body muscle clench thing they have pilots do to counteract the G-forces pulling blood away from your brain. I did those clenches for the rest of the ride and managed to avoid passing out, got off the ride and toddled off to a sheltered area to drink some water and cool off. Lessons about my heat tolerance were learned that day, but the pre-existing lesson about hook maneuvers meant I got to learn them while conscious and in private instead of from an impatient EMT after they revived me. Answer. My dad got full-blown heat stroke a couple years ago while living in one of the hottest parts of the world. Outside temperature was around 50 C. It permanently damaged his gums. Shortly after, several of his teeth fell out. He developed severe gum diseases, and his salivary glands were damaged, so he now has permanent dry mouth. The teeth that remained are all messed up. I knew heat stroke was a medical emergency, but I didn't realize how badly it messes you up for a long time after. Don't get heat stroke. Story 20. When a child person is having a seizure, get them on the floor and on their side, and do nothing until paramedics arrive. My wife saved a seizing 4-year-old from her mother, who was flinging her around like a rag doll screaming for help. Story 21. Knowing how to tie knots literally saved my life. Know how to tie a munter hitch and carry a climbing carabiner while backpacking. I was camping in winter, slipped on some ice and slid several meters on an ice sheet, all the way to the side of a cliff. My pack caught on a root or something with my legs over the edge. The way back up was sheer ice and not possible to go up, as I didn't have crampons accessible to climb an ice sheet. Even if I was in a position to turn around and get oriented to go up, there was no choice but down. The fall would have only been about 6 Fenster, while the impact wouldn't have eliminated me. The broken bones would have made it impossible to self-rescue. I had no cell service here, and no one was expecting to hear from me for about 3 days. It would have been likely that someone would find my frozen corpse several weeks later. I had rope for my hammock accessible to me. I tied a bowline knot on a rock I could reach, used the carabiner on my belt and a belt loop, tied a Mumter hitch to the beaner, slowly got my arms out of the pack while I weighted the rope. I managed to turn myself around and free my pack while now over the side of the cliff fully. I threw my pack to the ground below and rappelled down. My rope was only 5 miller, so there was still a drop at the bottom, but only about 1.5 meters rather than around 6. I managed to get down uninjured after having a pseudo-panic attack and having the adrenaline dump from survival. I then found a spot to climb up safely and rescue my rope. Keeping calm and thinking through the problem while having the skills of knots saved my life. Knots to master in case you need them in an emergency. Bowline, clove hitch, figure 8, and munter. Story 22. The most dangerous thing I usually do is drive. These tips are about 63 of my driving knowledge, and I do pretty good. Don't pass if it's a double yellow, but especially don't pass another car going over a hill or around a curve. Look before you change lanes. If your car engine is overheating, turn the heat on full blast. Maybe just older cars saved my jerk in a traffic jam outside Nashville coming back from spring break in '01. Assume every container in the road is filled with nails, as in try not to run it over. Brake. Don't swerve. Unless you need to swerve, then do what you gotta do. Answer. I've got one for when there aren't hazards, an everyday tip for every second you're driving. Don't look at the road right in front of you. Look at the road 500, 1,000 feet ahead of you. Anticipate incidents, obstacles. Don't react to them. Also, coast up to stop signs and traffic lights. Your foot should almost never go directly from the gas to the brake. Story 23. Knew nothing about it, so took a scuba diving certification class during grad school. I was paired with a strangely nervous guy. The rest were couples. He had to retake the pool test a few times. On the first open water dive day, we swam out in pairs as a group with wetsuits, flippers, maybe BC and weight belt. Halfway out, and in mild surf, my designated dive buddy had a full panic nutty after swallowing some water and tried to climb on top of me. Had long ago been a Boy Scout and took the lifeguard merit badge where they described this exact scenario and what to do. I gulped air, dove down so he'd let go of me, and swam up behind his panic jerk. Put him in a light headlock, as I recalled taking for that ancient merit badge test, and swam us both into shore like that. The dive master was apoplectic, screaming at us, swimming away from the rest of his group, and turned everyone around and brought the entire group back to shore. He was pissed until he understood what had happened. They expelled him, and the dive master was my diving buddy for the rest of the sessions and final dive with full gear. Story 24. Saw a news article about what 3 words and thought it sounded really useful, so told my kids to make sure they had the app on their phones in case they ever needed me to pick them up, and they didn't know where they were. Fell over and broke my ankle, and had to use it to help the ambulance located me. Rang my daughter to let her know what was going on, and the first thing she said was, "What's your 3 words?" Not exactly saved my life, but certainly saved time when I was sat in the snow waiting for help. Answer. I was once climbing in a big quarry on a coastline. Somebody fell, and due to their belayer's error, hit the floor, very obviously and seriously breaking both her legs. Nobody had phone signal. After sprinting to the top of the quarry, my friend just managed to get through to emergency services and tell them her W3W. Imagine trying to describe the location of part of a quarry with barely any signal. The person who fell got airlifted out, incredible to witness, especially in the coastal winds. No idea what the outcome was, though. Story 25. Get your skin checked, especially if you're in Australia. Just had a rapidly growing melanoma cut out that thankfully hadn't invaded deeper. Story 26. Not with a human, but it's the best I've got. I carry around a packet of raisins as bee savers for poorly bees and have saved quite a few lives now. Story 27. I rehabbed aggressive dogs and learned how to act in a dog attack situation. If it's one dog, stay still. Don't run, don't fight. Put your hands up so it doesn't grab your arms or nip your fingers, and don't give it any stimulus. If you run, it's a game. If you fight, it's a fight. Either way, you're going to lose. Be prepared to fight if you have to, because running you'll die tired. Hit it hard, hit it fast, and get ready to have a really bad day. Then the day came. I was getting out of my car and my neighbor's untrained pit bull that he was walking without a leash decided to charge me. I did all the things, and as he got up to me, he was confused because nothing was happening. It stopped and tried to goad me into doing something, leading to him trying to nip my leg. So I took the bag of Arizona iced tea cans I had just bought and swung like that, shoot downwards like a medieval flail, cracked it right between the eyes and on top of the nose and backed it off. I'm not sure it even knew what just happened. And then the owner showed up, so who knows what would have happened. Answer: I was walking my senior dog when an unleashed German Shepherd and their owner came down the path. He immediately started for my dog, but not in a playful way. In a, I don't like that guy and want him dead kind of way. I didn't think, just stepped between the shepherd and my dog and didn't move when it ran up. Eudora skidded to a halt and snarled at me, but I didn't do anything. Just stayed between them. After hesitating, it went back to the owner, who only put it on a leash when I started yelling, and then got mad at me. Story 28. It wasn't quite life or passing, but I had a fire start on the stovetop, most likely from spilled oil or other foodstuffs. And I remembered some insurance commercial that said to use baking soda to put out small grease fires, and was able to get it out before it became too big. Story 29. A bar in the bottom of a sliding glass door track to prevent it from opening. When I split from my ex, I moved with an infant into a ground floor apartment with a sliding glass door. My dad asked my brother-in-law to cut a piece of wood to put into the bottom of the interior door track to prevent it from opening. Sure enough, when he showed up to eliminate me, that piece of wood saved my life. It kept him out and bought me time. Also, plenty of people heard him taking a crowbar to my front door, and no one else called for help. My neighbor saw him and recognized him but didn't want to get in the business. When someone is trying to eliminate me, please get in my business. I am much older and wiser now, and I will err on the side of my safety and yours. Story 30. Always a pack, a map, and compass. Yes, you have GPS. Yes, you can download a map. Yes, you even have a charger to make sure your equipment stays charged throughout the hike. None of that is a guarantee. Always pack a map and compass. Answer: even just a compass. I've explained this to my scouts and soldiers in the land navigation courses. Assuming that you know you are camped west of Big Bend River and you get lost, the general rule is follow small water to big water to find civilization. Well, which way is Big Bend River? It's east. You won't need a map to find it, but even at night or on cloudy and overcast days, you can reliably find the river with just a compass. Also helps keep you from just walking in circles. Story 31. Always wear wool and never cotton next to skin than hiking somewhere cold and or wet. Wool has saved me from hypothermia on many occasions. Answer: linen next to the skin and wool as the outer layer is even better. The combo is so darn comfortable, wicking, thermal regulating, and easily moves from warm dry to cold wet environments. A loose weave wool also lets just enough wind through that you can be comfy on a sunny but windy dock. When I wear wool and linen, I'm usually more comfortable than the people who spend hundreds of dollars on their synthetics. We dressed like that for thousands of years, and TBH, I've never understood why we stopped. Story 32. Truck water and food. Always carry sealed drinking water in the vehicle. Keep some no-heat ready-to-eat food stuff in your vehicle. I got stranded in Cornfield, Iowa during a snowstorm and had to wait it out for 4 days until I get dug out. Lost myself in Idaho and got my rig stuck really good way out in the back country for a week. Beef jerky and a 5-gallon jug of potable water got me through. Story 33. I learned this the hard way. But if you get robbed, just give up on the stuff they stole from you. Just breath and collect your thoughts on what to do next to get home safely. Do not chase, fight back, or else. In trying to chase them, I got a broken jawbone, several teeth, and I could touch my jawbone with my finger. I wouldn't wish this to anyone. Broken teeth and jaw is not a thing to mess with unless you enjoy eating through a straw for the next 3 months plus. Remember, what they stole from you can be replaced even if it holds sentimental value. Your jaw is not. Story 34. My dad taught me how to drive on ice. Knowing how to countersteer and not panic definitely saved me when I spun out on ice next to a huge drop-off. Story 35. Stop the car. I'm going to vomit. I used this twice. Once with a friend who was driving super high, and I had no clue she actually crashed her car 2 days later. And once with a guy who wasn't taking no for an answer. He stopped and I booked it. If you're freaked and need to get out of a car, and if the person is not listening and stopping, say you're going to be sick. Story 36. To preface, I was 21, weighed all of 95 lbs, and looked like I lived to party. I was at a BBQ of a wealthy family member of my friend in San Francisco. I knew nobody except my friend. The host let his dogs have the rib bones. One of them started gagging in distress. While everyone sat staring at the choking animal, I jumped up, grabbed the dog, shoved my arm down its throat, and retrieved the bone. I threw it onto the patio and looked at the host with fire. "Do not give your dog bones," I screamed. Not a single person responded, not even a thank you, but I saved a dog's life that day. Yeah, me. Story 37. If you are swimming in the sea and you are in danger or drowning or a current is taking you away, don't panic. Look for the best way to swim into safety. Don't waste your energy. Adrenaline will help, but you need to dose your strength and keep swimming, even if you think it's a lost cause. It saved my life in the Atlantic Sea. Answer: got caught in a rip current in the Atlantic. Before I could even realize what was happening, I was too far from shore to call for help. I was trying to swim parallel to the shore, but was already too tired to even make much of an effort. I was freaking out, but I forced myself to relax and take some deep breaths, which allowed me to float on the surface, which allowed the water to carry me forward instead of pulling me back. I finally made it to where I could touch and drag myself back onto the sand. Moments later, the guards came through to put up the flags, warning not to swim because of rip currents. Story 38. CPR is a big one. Don't just try to guess where their heart will be. To be sure where it is, you can move your hands up the side of their body. When you hit their armpit, move to the center. CPR is hard as shoot to do, and if you're doing it, the survival chances are low. So don't be too hard on yourself if they don't survive. I'm trained in how to do CPR and have done it a good few times now and haven't had anyone survive yet. The most recent was a car crash where the guy passed out at the wheel about 20 seconds before I got there. We had ambulance there within 10 minutes and a defibrillator there within 2 minutes. It was what I'd describe as the perfect scenario outside of a hospital environment, and the guy still didn't make it. Don't be a hero when doing CPR. Don't ask people to do things. Direct them. Shout at them if you have to. Person A, ring ambulance. Person B, watch what I'm doing and take over when I tell you to. Don't do it for more than a minute or so. If other people are there to take over from you, you can take turns between you all. The worst case scenario in that situation is that they die, which they're already in the process of doing anyway. The guy I mentioned above, the last person I did it on, only had injuries caused by me breaking his ribs. He had no other injuries and dropped down dead. Story 39. If you're underwater struggling and disoriented, blow bubbles to know which way to swim. I inhaled water coming out of a big water slide that dropped me from height into water. The water from the slide pouring down directly on me was creating a current. I was stuck and don't know which way was up. I'm a fairly strong swimmer, but panicked. I blew some bubbles and was able to work out which way to swim, just about dragged myself out of the pool on time and coughed my guts up whilst the lifeguard carried on, staring into space in the other direction. Edit. I think the original advice I was thinking of was to spit when buried in an avalanche to know which way is down. Story 40. Not my life, but don't move anyone with a potential spinal injury. I recently drove up to a very fresh, very bad motorcycle accident, bike versus pickup truck. The injured guy's friends were about to try to take his helmet off. I ran up like a crazy person and yelled to not touch him, then kept his head and neck immobilized until the EMTs showed up. He was conscious but not oriented and kept asking his friends to move him, which was quite obviously not in his best interest. Story 41. During airplane emergencies, always put your oxygen mask on first, then help others. You only have 10 to 15 seconds before you'll pass out otherwise. Also, fudge that luggage. Dragging it along will eliminate people. Story 42. Spend it while you have it. Yes, cutting down firewood, building a shelter, constructing a fish trap, etc. will take energy, which you're instinctively trying to preserve. But worst case scenario, in a few days, you're not going to have energy anyways. And you're way better off with some previously made investments. Story 43. If you feel like you're going to faint, sit down before you fall down. A fall can eliminate you, even on a flat surface. Story 44. If you're tired, pull over. I've almost died a couple times on highways for various reasons. Inclement weather, accidents caused by other drivers, wildlife, getting into a vehicle with someone who shouldn't have been driving, but only once for nearly falling asleep. You feel drowsy, get off the road. It's as simple as that. Answer. I have had people get mad at me for my drive taking longer than expected simply because I will pull over and have a 10-15 minute snooze as soon as I start to feel sleepy, and I won't apologize for that. I know that after 15 minutes, I'm good to drive for at least another 30-40 minutes, sometimes longer and sometimes not. If I start to feel sleepy again, then I stop and nap again. I don't care if I get home an hour later. It's much better than not getting home at all. Story 45. Everybody in, nobody out. River safety is no joke. My friend's dog jumped into a river and started to get swept away due to the increased current from flooding. My friend jumped into the river to rescue her dog. I started to jump in after her, heard the safety phrase in the back of my head, grabbed a branch and swung myself back onto land. There was a decent drop into the river. I ended up having to run down the shoreline a bit to catch up to them, and then hoisted both my friend and her dog out of the water. None of us would have been able to make it out had I have also jumped in. Story 46. Hypothermia. Heat the person up with body heat, not hot water. Also warm socks and a hat. I also improvised some warm heating pads with towels and trash bags soaked in warm water. Spend an entire night saving someone's life. Guy doesn't remember it because hypothermia can affect your memory. Answer. For future reference, the warmth goes in the underarms, back of the neck, crotch, elbows, and behind the knees. If you have limited heating packs, concentrate on the underarms, neck, and crotch. That is where your veins are closest to the skin and will help carry the warmth to the rest of the body. Skin-to-skin contact under a blanket also works very well for heating a hypothermic person. Story 47. Wearing a life vest in any open body of water. I am a good swimmer, but I am so glad that I wore a life vest when whitewater rafting. The water is so cold. When you are thrown in, you go into shock. I couldn't even breathe for a few seconds, let alone swim to the surface on my own. Story 48. Drive as if your own child could run out from behind of every obstacle alongside the road, because one day someone will. And when braking, hit it hard right away. Full brake. Braking gently, slowly, or gradually costs you meters you don't have. Try this somewhere safe to develop the reflex. Modern cars are built to be mostly controllable under full braking, so you won't improve controllability by braking too slowly. Sources, own experience, racing instructor. Story 49. If the fire alarm goes off, grab your pet and get out of the building. Saved me and my wife's lives this past Monday. Story 50. If you are being attacked or threatened, yell fire instead of help. Sadly, people yelling for help are often ignored because people assume it's a DV situation and they don't want to get involved. A fire is different. A fire could threaten the whole neighborhood if it's ignored. I was watching a friend's house while they were away and a stranger came in and attacked me. I managed to get away and over to an open window. I had just seen a TV show with this advice, so I used it. I only had to yell it twice before neighbors were out in the streets calling 911. Story 51. Serum. Pay attention to your gut and other animals if you are out and about. If you are walking in the woods or swimming, and suddenly it is very quiet and there is no signs of any animals when there was, before something very bad is about to happen, either there to you or to the area that you are immediately in. When the world goes silent, all of a sudden you need to listen and find out why. Along those lines, if something feels off and your stomach is doing knots and your body is telling you that you are about to put yourself in serious harm or danger, you need to listen. It is much better to just say no and to be thought of as a coward than to die for doing something stupid when every muscle in your body already told you not to do it. Story 52. The Heimlich maneuver. Learn to do it on yourself and other people. Saved myself and my dog separate occasions. Story 53. Doing the Heimlich on myself using a chair back. I was home alone choking on a piece of steak. Scary, but it worked. Story 54. Not my life, and maybe not a popular answer, but if you are lost and you need to be rescued, don't wander off. Stay nearby someplace as open as you safely can. Find water or whatever, then make a big mess. Make it easier to spot from the air or through the trees. You'll last longer if you don't waste energy moving, and the mess will stand out even a little bit for a search team. I've seen it work more often than the alternatives. It's easier to find a person than track a person, after first finding where they had been. Story 55. Wear seatbelts. I did, and the T-bone accident was on my side. My brother didn't, and he died that day. Story 56. Don't question your instinct. Think you're being followed? Stop abruptly. The person you have a hunch about will most likely be thrown off whatever they're thinking about and keep moving. This worked with someone with a butterfly knife that they were struggling to get open behind me for whatever reason. Same with cars that pass. If they slow or pull in ahead on the route you're on, cross to the opposite side of the road behind them. If you ever have a doubt, switch up your behavior instantly. Story 57. Call 911. Airway, breathing, or circulation. If any of these is in any doubt, just call 911. This saved my life when a major artery burst in my neck, closing off my airway. 1 to 2 minutes of delay in calling or arriving at the emergency department, and I would either be dead or as good as. Story 58. Always pack the 10 essentials when going into the backcountry. This saved my life a few years ago, but not in the way you'd think. Long story short, I was out camping with the guy I was dating, and he got extremely tipsy and held me hostage via knife in his camper van for 6 hours. I eventually managed to grab my pack and run for it into the woods. If I hadn't had that pack and known that I could survive an unexpected night alone outside, I would have stayed and probably not lived to tell the tale. That pack and a can of bear spray saved my life. Also, yep, I called the cops. Nope, they didn't care at all. Nope, the court didn't grant me a restraining order because I managed to escape before he physically harmed me. And yep, he got off scot-free and is somewhere out there in the world probably terrorizing some other poor woman. Story 59. Got caught in a snowstorm while hiking. I remembered a tip. Don't wander, stay put, and stay warm. I made a small shelter and waited. Hours later, rescue found me. If it kept walking, I probably wouldn't be here. That tip legit saved my life. Story 60. Rettungsgasse. In case of a traffic jam on the German Autobahn, the cars in the left lane go as far to the left as possible. The cars in all the lanes to the right of the very left lane go as far to the right as possible. And it doesn't matter if it's 2 or 6 lanes. That creates a passageway for police, fire trucks, and ambulances so they can get to potential accidents. My mom and I got into an accident that flipped and squashed the car. First responders were able to get my mom out, but I was stuck and bleeding heavily because my broken femur broke through the skin. Only because of everyone creating a proper emergency lane, the firefighters and the ambulance were with me fast enough to get me out and stop the bleeding. If this hadn't been the case, I might have lost the leg or died. Story 61. Never remove a knife or other object from a stab wound. It may be acting as a plug. It also helps doctors assess how deep the wound is to allow for more informed treatment. Story 62. I saved a baby's life once. He stuffed cotton from a broken pillow into his mouth. He coughed twice and it was muffled, so I checked on him and his face was purple and he was no longer coughing or making any sound. So I flipped him over and pounded on his back, then started grabbing cotton and pulling it out. He ended up vomiting everywhere before I could clear it, but it was enough and he vomited the rest out. I was only 20 and he was 8 months. I loved that family, but quit just weeks later. His mom kept placing the ripped pillow back within reach, even after I told her he nearly died. And she was a freaking nurse. So to avoid watching a child die, I left. Still in touch with them today. Story 63. Listen to your instincts. You are the result of millions of years of evolution that has one simple goal: keep you alive. If you feel something is wrong or out of place, just get out, do something. Even if it doesn't make sense. Even if you think it's just paranoia. Story 64. My best friend was held up at gunpoint. The dude pointed and told her to go to a more secluded area. She remembered a police officer once telling her, never go to a second location. She refused and she's here today, and I'm forever thankful. Story 65. I once saw a post on Reddit about someone who had a weird red line going up their arm. Everyone told them to go to the ER, that it was an infection leading up to their heart. A couple of years later, my husband cut his elbow. 2 days later, he started with a fever, and when I looked at his arm, I saw the line and made him go right away. We were on vacation, and he wanted to wait until we got home. 3 days in the hospital and a surgery later, he was okay, but the nurse told us he could have lost his arm or died if he brushed it off like he tried to. So thank you to that Reddit poster. Story 66. Go limp before a collision. I did this when I flipped my car and hit a rock wall. I only ended up with a couple of bruises despite my car looking like a crumpled piece of paper. Story 67. When traveling, leave all your real jewelry at home. Get cheap costume, fake jewelry to wear, fake Rolex, fake rings, etc. When you get mugged, they think they made a good score and run off. They'll find out later that instead of 5,000 worth of diamonds, they got 5 worth of garbage. This paid off when we were robbed in Jamaica. Story 68. Wear a seatbelt. Was a passenger in a single vehicle accident where the car rolled at high speed, totaled, would have been very dead if it wasn't for the seatbelt and crumple zone. Story 69. Forward rolls over the shoulder, not somersaults over the neck. Motorcycle accident. This saved me from cracking my head open on the street. First time martial arts class saved my jerk. Story 70. If the situation feels bad, get the fudge out. Trust your feelings. Yeah, you could be wrong, but you'll be alive. Story 71. First at a red light, pause 1 second when it turns green to look both ways for red light runners. Saved me at least 3 times. Story 72. My godfather told me when I was about 10 that whenever he was first in line at a traffic light, when it turned green, he waited 3 seconds before taking his foot off the brake. This has carried over into my adult life. I'm 40 now. Anytime I'm at an intersection, whether I'm driving, walking, or riding my bike, has saved my life several times. He was eliminated in a head-on collision when I was 13. I feel like this is an important thing to pass on. Story 73. My parents made me so taekwondo as a kid. They told us that if we were ever threatened with a weapon, we should do what we were told and only fight as a last resort. That advice came in very handy a few years later when I had a gun pointed at my face. I lost 14 and a crappy phone, but came out physically unharmed. Story 74. In the outskirts, just a couple hundred meters away from the tourist-filled area, a pack of wild dogs appeared. I was alone thinking, fudge, I need to make my way back to the crowds for safety. As I began walking backwards, the dogs began to advance towards me, barking viciously. Then I remembered a video I saw online saying if you fan out your body to look big, they'll back away. So I began running backwards and opened my arms towards the sky when the dogs got a bit too close. They backed away for a bit every time I did this. After a while, I finally made it back to the crowd safely, where the dogs decided not to follow any further. TLDR. I made myself look bigger by extending my arms out to scare away a pack of wild dogs. Story 75. Listen to your instincts. I was minutes away from getting to the neighborhood ATM when something in my mind told me to head back home now. So I did. When I got home, a friend who lived nearby messaged me that a lady just got mugged at our neighborhood ATM minutes ago. Still gives me goosebumps. Story 76. I was a CPST and went to the home of a family and taught them how to properly install and use their car seats for their toddler and new baby. And about 2 months later, mom was driving and they were in a pretty bad accident. The SUV rolled a few times, airbags deployed, etc. Mom had some injuries. Kids survived without a scratch. Basically, the best day of my life. Story 77. Was at a store browsing. A few minutes later, I hear someone screaming for help. I have BLS training, so I walk over to a family. The kid ended up choking on a darn candy. I don't blame the kids, but I do believe all parents should be mandated to take CPR and basic survival measures for their babies before they get to take them home from the hospital after birth. I stepped in. Did the Heimlich, he spit out the candy, but till this day, I'm still get a little annoyed thinking about all the parents who have zero clue how to save their babies and children from choking. Choking can happen so easily to anyone, but especially children. Story 78. My dog's life. Grabbed a big attacking dog's hind legs and lifted straight up and away. Couldn't bite me or my dog. Post owners said they'd pay our vet bills, but ghosted. I still think about salting their lawn. Story 79. Not necessarily a survival tip per se, but needs to be said never to the less. Trust your gut. And if someone is following you, go towards the crowd, not away. Source. Attacked in broad day at a grocery store. Story 80. My cousin and I were kidnapped by 2 guys and they drove us up a mountain. When we realized that they were kidnapping us instead of taking us home, I whispered to my cousin that I will get out of the car on her side, then we run. Finally up the mountain, they pulled into a house, and I got out on her side and yelled, run. We ran out, jerk off. The guys started yelling, and they got back into the car, started after us, but I told her to run into the woods. This was at night, so we ran about 10 feet into the woods as stopped and froze. They had their windows down, driving really slow, trying to get us to come back. We were only 15. We ended up walking all the way home, having to run back into the woods when we heard their car. Finally, they gave up. Story 81. I saw this on Reddit and it helped me. Not a crazy survival tip, but calling 911 without cell service still works. It can piggyback off any cell service available in the area. I got stuck in a ditch in heavy snow and it saved me big time. Answer. Calling 911 without cell service still works without coverage from your provider. You still need other cell coverage. I think some phones show this as emergency calls only versus no service. The latter means you're screwed. Also, modern iPhones have satellite-based emergency calling. I think you don't get a call, but you can send an emergency message. Story 82. Not my life, but my husband's. When administering chest compressions, you need to push a lot harder than you think. The old adage is if you broke a rib's sternum, you did it right. Story 83. Keeping a safe following distance always on the highway out of habit. Kept me out of an accident last week. Story 84. I was told if you had a cramp in your leg accompanied by redness, it's a life-threatening blood clot and to get emergency help immediately. My friend had been complaining for 2 days about a cramp in his leg, so I made him pull up the leg of his jeans, and his skin was bright red. I tried not to panic as I told him he needed immediate help. I was visiting and set to catch a train in 30 minutes, so he promised he'd go in. He did not go in, but he called NHS, and they were like, "Do not move, do not panic, keep your heart rate calm. We're sending someone right away." And it was then he realized I wasn't kidding. He made it in, and apparently it was really bad. And if he'd waited any longer, it would have dislodged and he would have died. The doctor told him I'd saved his life. He reminds me of that from time to time too. I'm so glad I knew what the signs of a clot were. Story 85. Best way out of a rip current is to swim parallel to the shore. My friend and I were alone on a beach about a mile hike down from the nearest highway. I just kept thinking how no one was going to save me if I didn't keep swimming diagonally. Truly a terrifying moment. Story 86. Drove home after worker. Was too lazy to stripe off my fire gear. Cal 24 electrical clothing. Got into a car accident. Fire department pulled me out of a burning wreck. Face, neck, hand, and feet burnt, survived. Laziness saved my life. Toyota Tundra 2019 burnt to a crisp. Story 87. If you are being followed, act crazy. Flail around, talk to yourself, make weird noises. Make it appear a burden to engage with you in any way you can. This has saved me twice. Once walking home, second from a creep at the river. Story 88. When you see a big fire, just call emergency. It's simple, but I know people that doesn't care and run and do anything else. By that call, I saved the life of an entire family. Story 89. If you're going to be on a ladder, wear a bicycle helmet. Also, most falls off ladders happen at the bottom few rungs. Story 90. Yuri. Stranger danger saved my butt. I was driving late at night in the countryside, and a car with at least one passenger, plus the driver, pulled up real close behind me, flashing its lights. I know that's a signal for help, but it was dark, and I was just a girlie on a lonely road at night. Anyway, I pulled over. They stopped, got out of the car, and then I sped off. IDK what they had in mind, but at that hour, it couldn't have been anything good. Story 91. If lost, find a road and sit down and wait. Was lost in the middle of nowhere, BFE, Oregon, when I was 12 years old, because we left the truck early in the morning when it was still dark to get to our hunting spot by daylight. Later that day, my dad was having a medical emergency, so couldn't walk back to the truck, so I walked to the road and couldn't find the truck. I sat there, waited, and sure as shoot, a random truck with these two elderly people come rolling up and asked if I needed a ride and drove me down the road to my truck. I ended up walking a mile down the wrong direction. They told me that something in their gut told them to take the left road instead of the usual right turn they take to go home, and found me chilling by the road. They gave me a payday and a bottle of water because it was hot that day and I had layers of camo on too. This day, my favorite candy bar is a payday. Story 92. Moss grows on north, northwest, west sides of trees. Doesn't seem like much until you need to decide which way to hike to safety lost in a national forest for 4 days. Answer, yes, or follow water downhill. There's a much more likely chance you'll find people near the coast, ocean, riverways. But if you're lost in the wilderness and there's no waterway near you, stay where you are and just try to survive. If you hear a helicopter, go to the most open place you can find. Thermal camera will find you. A case that is absolutely haunting me is a 7-year-old boy sleeping and freezing to passing under a rocky overhang so that thermal cameras couldn't spot him. Story 93. This was a very minor thing, but one time my boyfriend said his vision was getting blurry, with strings of light outlining his sight. I recognized the symptoms from a migraine commercial that showed simulated tunnel vision. Even though he had never had a migraine before, I told him to get off the computer, take Excedrin, and rest in a dark room. About 20 minutes later, the migraine pain kicked in. However, since he took Excedrin early, the pain came on briefly, then quickly subsided. If he'd waited to take Excedrin until after the pain already started, it would have been significantly less effective, and he would have probably experienced a full-blown migraine. He asked me how I knew he was about to have a migraine, and I admitted it was just from watching a migraine commercial. Lol. Story 94. Get a pap test. It's uncomfortable and embarrassing, but if your fab can save your life, it did mine. Story 95. When I was around 8, I got caught in a riptide, and somehow, after panicking for a few seconds, remembered to swim parallel to the shore. I swam and swam, but eventually made it to shore. I then had to walk all the way back to where my aunt was sunbathing. When I finally made it back, I collapsed on the sand, and she told me to not swim too far down the shoreline again. Never told her what happened because I was worried she wouldn't let me come back. Story 96. Baby first aid. I've saved 3 babies so far. Those first foods are no joke. Be prepared, infant first aid classes are usually free. Check your local resources. Story 97. On holiday and playing football by the sea, ball goes in. I go in after it, and after 5 minutes of swimming, I realized the ball was moving out as fast as I was swimming to it. As I turned around and tried to make it to the shore, it dawned on me that I was in a riptide and remembered from watching 999, British rescue program, to get on my back and float out of it. Story 98. Motorcycle neck brace protector saved my nephew's life, according to his surgeon. Broke both legs and back, but a neck was fine. Story 99. It was the summer 1999, and I was living in downtown MPLs. I went to a party and my friend, my ride, hooked up with the owner of the house, so I crashed on the couch. The sun was coming in the windows early, so I just decided to walk home instead of waking them up. It was really early, but a lovely morning. I was about 2 blocks from my apt, and I came up on a portly man who was loading some tools into the back of a white cargo van. He looked at me with a straight-up Cheshire grin and the scariest eyes I had ever seen and asked if I could give him a hand loading my tools into his van. I ran away from him like a bat out of hell, and he screamed at me, "You keep Zuri." Not sure what movie I got the survival tip from, but don't help scary guys put tools in vans. Story 100. When whitewater rafting, I was taught nose to toes, and it definitely helped me out because my feet hit the big rock instead of my head. I was wearing a helmet. Story 101. Don't use metal bottles for mountain hikes. My water got frozen. I had to put it under my shirt to get it to melt a bit. It was so painful to my skin. You will get a burst of energy if you ever get dehydrated, which serves as a last chase to find water. Search for it in a cave. There are small droplets on the walls sparkling when you turn the light on. Story 102. My life tip, but not my life tip. Veteran here. I was in a vehicle that hit something and caught on fire. There were only civilians around able to respond. After several minutes of trying to break the window with rocks and sticks, one of them remembered that they had a novelty knife with a window breaker on the handle. They pulled it out and within seconds broke the cracked window and pulled me out as the flames were kissing my face and chest. I always carry a small knife with a window breaker handle in my civilian life. You never know whose day it can make a difference to. Story 103. Don't ignore signs of pain or unusual shortness of breath. Last year, after a basketball game ended spectacularly, it started to become hard to breathe and it hurt to breathe. When I laid on my side, I had immediate sharp pain in my chest. Rushed myself immediately to the ER. Turns out I collapsed my lung. Story 104. In residential treatment, they told us that the success of mental health treatment hinges on self-discipline. Med compliance, consistent therapy, sobriety if applicable, all somewhat rely on self-discipline. I really took that one to heart. Story 105. When my ex pushed me against the wall during a fight, everything in my body froze. When he left, a surge of memories all telling me, it'll only get worse after the first time, and he never gets better. I didn't let me have enough time to cool down or guess my decision. I grabbed my stuff and just left after leaving a note that it's over and why I left. I blocked him on everything, notified my friends and parents. Some time goes by and I was told during a normal holiday get-together that he was serving time after knocking his wife out cold while tipsy that she fell into a ditch and passed away from freezing. That same thought about it never gets better ran through my brain again, but it felt gut-wrenching that if I didn't act that night or stayed one more night to give it a second chance, I could have been her. Story 106. If you are ever unfortunate enough to be taken against your will, do not panic. Do what they want. I believe I owe my life to this. Story 107. A Mythbusters episode that showed how to protect your neckhead in the case of an accident might have saved my life. I was in a horrific car crash. Long story, but my ex was trying to take down Tragic End after kidnapping me. And as I was waiting for the inevitable to happen, I remembered that episode. So I used my arms to protect and cushion my head and neck as much as possible. I did still break my lower spine, but my doctors told me that extra cushioning I provided, and the cushion from having landed on the one patch of grass in a big parking lot, very well may be why I didn't die or get paralyzed. Story 108. Rafted the North Fork of the American. Going into Bogus Thunder Rapid, the guide told us not to fall out, but if we did, to stick to the right bank and to not go past the bend because the next rapid would probably eliminate us. We almost made it, but got stuck on the last boulder, tipping everyone out. I just barely managed to not get swept around that bend. Story 109. Heimlich maneuver. Learned it when I was 13 because my aunt was a bit of a worrier. I went on a trip in college with 8 friends, and we were hanging out in my hotel room when one guy started coughing after eating a chip, and everyone else was laughing, but I recognized the signs. When I performed the Heimlich and he spit out a chip, everyone just laughed harder. He told me 2 days later he thought it was the end for him.